Jesus Christ! Trump appropriates the image of Jesus Christ. Again, this time it is not him pretending to be Jesus. It's him... How does one phrase something like this? It looks in this image like Trump is about to make out with Jesus. I mean, none of the components here would constitute my areas of expertise, but Jesus is clearly fondling Trump's chest, and Trump's eyes are closed in ecstasy, and I don't think it's religious ecstasy. Hey, watch where you put your hands, Jesus. As Americans ranging from atheists to papists to Jesus impersonators recoil, Trump put this out just 3 days after his image of himself as Jesus or as Dr. Jesus or as Dr. Johnny Jesus or whatever he claimed it was. The radical left lunatics might not like this, but I think it's quite nice, he wrote. Apart from the fact that you are seeing how Trump's life of rationalization works, his existence fits the psychological phenomenon known as no true Scotsman. This is not trivial. This is not something that just pisses off a couple of religious nuts. It pisses off an amazing variety of Americans on a visceral level, somewhere approximating that of Trump having insulted each of their mothers individually. Trump, though, reflexively tells himself his supporters get it. And, of course, anybody who doesn't get it is a lunatic, so isn't a supporter, so doesn't count, so he has 100% support. How does he sleep at night, you ask? That's how. In point of fact, if we accept the idea that Trump's cult, his beneficiaries, his enablers, his junta, have long since come to terms with the fact that they don't care if he's crazy, they don't care if he's evil, they don't care if every moment he is in power threatens the life of everybody and every animal and every plant on the planet, including them, so long as the power and the money keep on rolling in, we are, from their point of view, watching something worse than all of that. End of the world? So what? There's the rapture. This threatens the power and the money now because it touches something that his dwindling base is enslaved to. That entire spectrum running from deeply considered belief at the one end and then superstition and fear on the other end. I mean, this is so bad that after the first one, even Speaker Mike Johnson, who is Speaker Mike Johnson rather than ex-Speaker Mike Johnson, because he is capable of greeting any evidence of Trump's brain turning to tapioca by saying, I didn't see it, I didn't hear it, I didn't read it, I didn't smell it, I didn't taste it, I didn't put my hands on its chest. Even Mike Johnson has noticed the Jesus stuff.
Speaker Johnson, can I ask you about the president's post himself as Jesus? Was it blasphemy?
I talked to the president about it as soon as I saw it and told him that I don't think it was being received in the same way he intended it. He agreed and he pulled it down. That was the right thing to do. He explained how he saw that, and I don't think he thought it was sacrilegious at all. So,
do you think he should back down?
I think he showed great respect to others by removing it.
So, Mike, what about this new one with him and Jesus and the chest rub? No comment? There is no question that the Iran war, the Epstein files, the economy, half a dozen other crises are causing Republican support to bleed out as the midterms approach. But if they do lose the House, especially if they lose the Senate, and Chuck Schumer, not a reliable source, but certainly not a wild-eyed one, said yesterday he thinks the Democrats are going to take the Senate this year. I guess he's going to resign and put somebody else in charge of the campaign, but he thinks the Democrats are going to win the Senate in the midterms. And if the Republicans lose the House, and especially the Senate, depending on your viewpoint, either thank Jesus or blame Jesus. But not the Pope. The Republicans are, in fact, enjoying Trump doubling down on that part of this equation. Will someone please tell the Pope, he wrote, then his tired line about Iran killing protesters. The protesters Trump said he would protect and then didn't protect them, and saying all this as if Trump doesn't have protesters killed here. But about the Pope, if you're like me, spiritual, but you think all religions are wrong, and maybe their leaders are a step down from, telemarketers, you have to stand back and try to understand this. You have to look at it carefully and understand this is as if 3/4 of the world's population identified as firm, fundamental believers in, and to some degree as having based important decisions in their own lives, including how they live, who they marry, who they vote for, who they will comfort, who they will kill, based on which Marvel entertainment franchise they like best. These are not Marvel Comics fans who have preferences and sort of chuckled at the other guys like the other ones. These are Spider-Man fans who in their heart want to see all the Avengers fans dead. The Pope? Is the Pope Catholic? Why, yes, he is. Is Mike Johnson Catholic? Why, no, he's not. He's a leader in the Baptist Church. Is Trump's base Catholic? No, almost not at all. Would Trump's base actually have supported John F. Kennedy, a Catholic, for president, alive or as a reincarnated Catholic? No, of course not. Is Congressman Troy Nehls Catholic? No, and I really would find it hard to believe he's religious at all, but he's certainly not Catholic, not after this.
I probably say the Pope needs to keep his business into leading his flock, so to speak, leading the church, and probably stay out of the political arena. He doesn't need to be getting involved in the political arena. Go lead your church, but stay out of the politics, right? We didn't elect the Pope to be the president or be the anything else, so just keep his nose in the church's business and stay out of the political arena.
This is nothing new, obviously. MAGA views Pope Leo as just another impediment, in large part because right-wing governments have been attacking the Catholic Church since King Henry VIII, often with great reason. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. As I said, I don't care especially, although I have been told that in the 90s the Pope used to watch me on SportsCenter. And, of course, to borrow from the other legendary Chicago White Sox fan besides the Pope, Gene Shepard, the auteur of A Christmas Story, I will tend to listen to a White Sox fan more than any other human about eternity and suffering because, as Shep wrote, if I were going to storm a pillbox, going to sheer, utter, certain death, and the colonel said, Shepard, pick 6 guys, I'd pick 6 White Sox fans because they have known death every day of their lives and it holds no terror for them. That's your Pope. The problem with the strutting of clowns like Troy Nehls, who took the cigar out of his mouth briefly to give those comments, is when they try to expand, as Nehls did, their potshots at one religion, which I can support in principle, into some kind of dictum against going into the political lane by all Bible thumpers. Well, if religionists can't talk about politics, that means no support for Trump from Franklin Graham, or from the crazy White House advisor Paula White, or from, any megachurch or evangelical or that whole crowd that cheered as Trump said he was eliminating the Johnson rule and now pastors could campaign for him from the pulpit, or any of the end times clowns, or any of the dozens of active Republicans who have insisted in the last 2 months we are in Iran because Israel is owed biblical support. In other words, explain that the Pope has no right to talk politics, and you wipe out virtually the entire rationale for supporting Israel as it is understood by Trump's own cult, because Israel to them is only one thing. It's a means towards the rapture, which some days I sit around thinking the rapture can't happen soon enough. The other question raised by Trump's continuing fights with the Pope and Jesus is simply how many wars can Trump start and handle at the same time? War against the Pope, war against Iran, war against reality. The last two have become the same now. He again insists he is blockading the Strait of Hormuz when the Navy is clearly not blockading the Strait of Hormuz. The Navy is blockading the ports of Iran. He can't tell the difference. Many of the ships from the ports of Iran would go through the Strait of Hormuz, but that's not a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Trump does not understand this. It's too much trouble for him. He probably also doesn't understand when Iran comes back, as it did yesterday, to say it will now raise the ante. And if Trump doesn't back down from the blockade, he literally couldn't tell where it is from his ass or his elbow, it will now attack and block shipping in the Red Sea. But don't worry about that, explains Scott Bessent, adjusting his glasses for the 4 millionth time and making sure his head doesn't fall off. Gas will be back under $4 a gallon in the summer. The summer, which was when it was supposed to be under $2 a gallon before Trump's plans were screwed up by that evil traitor, checks notes, Trump. It's just too bad Trump's brain did not live long enough to see any of this. These quotes are from the transcript of Maria Bartiromo's interview with him yesterday. I just can't play clips of Maria Bartiromo. I don't think I can legally. I just can't listen to that voice. She says about the war, you keep saying was. Is this war over? Trump says, I think it's close to over, yeah. He's previously said it's over. I view it as very close to over. If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country. We're not finished. We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal. He has no concept that there is anything to a war besides blowing stuff up. Second topic, Bartiromo, did you see that Britain suffered the biggest growth forecast downgrade in the G7, so their economy is impacted? Trump's answer, they got to stop with the windmills. No true Scotsman. Bartiromo, moving to domestic issues, what are your top priorities now for the economy for the rest of the year? Trump, to be honest, we are doing so well. You look at this, I hit the 50,000 Dow mark. Look at me, I made poopy in the potty trainer, Mommy. Trump really is fighting reality now, not just avoiding it. He again insists he's already beaten Iran while insisting there will be ceasefire talks again imminently, or at least talks about starting new talks. Or I wonder if Trump is even being told how bad it is going for America in the Gulf right now and in the world generally. Or is this like Germany 1942, where citizens and many government officials were actually told, don't worry about it, the Luftwaffe has already totally destroyed New York City? There are lots of things in history I don't know. One of the fun things about history is finding out those things, but it still startles me when I read something like this. This was in the in-house magazine of NBC. The transmitter was just radio then, from January 1943, and I tripped over this doing some other online research the other day, quoting it. German prisoners transported to the United States express amazement that New York's skyline remains intact, say they heard broadcasts describing how their planes had smashed our skyscrapers to rubble. There's just a sample of how our enemies use the radio to delude their own people, put into practice Hitler's despicable theory that if lies are big enough, everyone will believe them, make a Nazi perversion of an invention that is one of the world's greatest sources of good. Unquote. NBC, 1943. Apart from the fact that what you heard described in there is the America that much of MAGA wants to see in our future. And I mean, I often get the feeling that given enough time, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr, even from that influential but pretty dry office, even Brendan Carr will somehow commit war crimes someday. I keep thinking that our present-day version of the astonished German POWs finding out Goebbels was lying is Trump. I don't think it takes much effort to convince him not to listen to the bad news you don't want to tell him, but I think they don't tell him. Like the bad news about how it's going abroad, where the newly elected leader of Hungary, Peter Magyar if you prefer, just announced his government will not continue Viktor Orban's policy of funding CPAC. The what now? Hungary was funding CPAC? Wait. As my old colleague Juliet Kayyem noted, Trump directed aid to Hungary. Then Hungary sent money to CPAC? So is this a story of Trump washing taxpayer money and illegally contributing it to his own campaign, if anybody would like to look at that? Or talking about foreign bad news, the whole Pope thing. Guess where that's not going down well? Italy, where the Vatican is, where an Italian reporter called Trump, who was apparently listed in the yellow pages under both despot and crackpot, and he got Trump to trash the Pope and Giorgia Meloni. Or how it's going in England, where Prime Minister Starmer once again yesterday insisted the UK will not get involved in Trump's war in Iran. But Ed Davey, who is the leader of the Liberal Democrats, who may be the third most influential party right now, maybe the second, what with the Conservatives melting, trying to coalesce an all-party move to convince King Charles not to make his scheduled state visit here, the King of England not to show up for the 250th anniversary of this country.
A whole civilization will die tonight. Words I never thought I would hear from an American president. And though Donald Trump thankfully didn't follow through this time, these words are a stark reminder of how reckless, immoral, and completely outside the bounds of international law this president is. Regrettably, he is no friend of the United Kingdom. He is no leader of the free world. He is a dangerous and corrupt gangster, and that is how we must treat him. So will the Prime Minister advise the King to call off his state visits to Washington before it's too late? Because I really fear for what Trump might say or do while our King is forced to stand by his side. We cannot put His Majesty in that position.
That really is the correct play for the King, by the way. Among other things that are calm now but will blow up when Charles gets here, he won't be meeting with Epstein survivors, which is just about as bad a plan as you could consider. Very unfortunate, as the most significant world figure implicated in the Epstein files just happens to be the King's brother. I think that may come up. And closer to home, there are problems here, too, that Trump probably doesn't know about. One group of Democrats in the House is gathering steam for an impeachment bill, which will not succeed. For another 9 months, it won't. And a second group is gathering steam for a bill demanding that the Trump cabinet invoke the 25th Amendment to depose Trump, which would take us to truly novel constitutional areas. But what the hell? We're already in them. And, of course, then the blowback against Trump takes us back to finish where we began, with religion in America. Have you heard the name Joel Webben? Joel Webben is one of those bearded evangelicals without whom Trump dries up and blows away. The good news on the evangelical front from Trump? Webben, president and founder of Right Response Ministries, senior pastor of the Covenant Bible Church, and consultant to the First Church of the Gooey Death, has asked this rhetorical question. Joel Webben asks, is Trump the Antichrist? He's answered it. No, biblical definitions. Trump is not the Antichrist. Congratulations, Mr. President. You're not the Antichrist. The bad news for Trump, Joel Webben does say, quote, I genuinely believe Trump is currently demon-possessed. Well, at least that would explain him making out with Jesus. Also of interest here, in the good old days when I tried to warn everybody about Fox News at least did big things. Like Billow once asking John McCain what he was going to do to protect the white power structure in this country. Those are the words that O'Reilly used. Now, O'Reilly's time slot successor is obsessed with when the appropriate point in time is to whip it out. I swear he said whip it out And that's what he meant on Fox, and he said it to your crazy MAGA grandma. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead on this all-new edition of Countdown, I promised you a story a few weeks back about the finest French restaurant in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to tell it as it was told to me by the alleged recipient. There was a candlelit meal, there was an aspiring reporter, there was Ted Turner, still in his drinking days, and there was a really effective slap. Next, in another thing I promised not to tell. In the interim, we always have more new idiots to talk about. The roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's other worst persons in the world. This edition is dedicated to Elizabeth Rose Halligan, a self-proclaimed digital creator per her Threads bio, and she says she's working on a thesis on anti-colonialism, which as a society we should encourage because this is a much bigger problem today, let alone through history, than most people acknowledge. On the other hand, as Marcus Aurelius observed, you are always entitled to not have an opinion on something, and this was one of those occasions where she should have listened to the old Roman emperor and colonizer. This was after the Artemis mission, and I quote Ms. Halligan and clean it up just a little bit. So I'm not trying to knock the gesture here, she writes. I get the sentiment. I feel for the astronaut who lost his wife, as it was devastating to lose my father-in-law, who I loved very much, to glioblastoma suddenly in 2023. But 4 astronauts deciding to name a spot on the effing moon after one guy's wife, while the other 8 billion of us down here have no input on naming S-word on the effing moon, still feels like colonizer behavior to me. And she concluded, I don't care if one of them was a black dude. The one saving grace on that last line that sounds really racist, no, she's an African American. The rest of it? Okay, let me just do some numbers here. There are 2 million craters on the moon. 1.3 million craters have been mapped. The total number that have been named, like for the late Carol Weissman, the late wife of the astronaut, the total number of named craters out of 2 million is 9,003. Apart from the idea that if this is colonizing behavior, it's not going very well for the colonizers, exactly how far do you want to take this, madam? If you buy one of those $35 certificates naming a star after your girlfriend and you give it to her for Christmas, are you colonizing one of the, infinity stars in the, infinite galaxy? Moreover, when the first human looked up and saw it up there, there was no sign on the moon reading, "This is the moon." We humans named it the moon. And in several other languages, it's other words that mean that. And collectively, we consider it our moon, Earth's moon, like the 2 moons going around Mars are Mars's moons. Is that colonizing it? Or should we let the moon name itself? Ms. Halligan tried to answer everybody, pointing out that no, she is trying to knock the gesture here, despite what she wrote, and no, she doesn't feel for the astronaut, and that, yes, anti-colonialism is important, but if you see it in a guy naming basically a large pothole on the moon after his dead wife, if you think that's colonizing, you may urgently need to see a therapist. And whatever you do, do not call that person your therapist. Colonizing because they named a hole in the moon after the man's late wife. Anyway, the medalists, the worst, bronze, clavicular, If, like me, you heard that name, but don't know what that is, this is a college dropout, 20 years old, learning challenged, takes excessive amounts of testosterone, apparently hits his bones with a hammer to recreate his face or something so he thinks he looks better, attaches the suffix max to everything, like looks maxed. So he's dumb maxed and hammer maxed, and in an interview with 60 Minutes Australia, he had a canned insult ready for the interviewer, and it blew up in his face maxed, so the only thing maxed he could think to do after that was walk out maxed of the interview maxed.
You've obviously shared company with Andrew Tate and other, dare I say, rather controversial figures. Why do you spend time with people like that?
All right, have a nice day. Are you trying to... I see you want to make this political. Too bad I didn't have time to look into, anything about potentially, who your wife cheated with. But don't try to go down that line of questioning with me, all right?
I mean,
because I'm not doing any political...
I'm not married.
Next time, Clavicle, just try your mom. By the way, Clavicular's real name is Braden, and he's from Hoboken, New Jersey. So what he's maxed actually is, he's loser maxed. Hi, I'm Braden. The runner-up worser, Andy Ogles, the congressman who introduced the Assimilation Act a week or so ago to prevent nearly all immigration to this country, promising that then America would look like America again. Even though Andy Ogles looks kind of vaguely foreign. Maybe a little Iranian, if I may say. Anyway, Congressman Crazy is back with a new proposal that suggests maybe Congress isn't the right group for him to belong to. He might have been better off being in charge of the Monday matinee at the Roman Coliseum. He tried to back out of the Eric Swalwell part of this. I don't think he really managed to do it too well.
The allegations of rape are, look, consenting adults is one thing, but when you're targeting, you're a predator and you're raping young women, let's hang them. Rapists should be hung, period. No questions. And so now I don't want the Secret Service to come. I'm not talking about Eric Swalwell. I'm not threatening a member of Congress. But the point is we got to say enough is enough.
So Congressman Ogles, if it's not about Swalwell, are you saying President Trump should be hanged? And yeah, it's hanged, not hung. Paintings are hung. Impeachment notices are hung. Wanted posters for corrupt or crazy congressmen are hung in the post office. People who you hang get hanged. Imbecile. Sadistic, crazy imbecile, Andy Ogles, who kind of looks kind of Iranian, just saying. But the winner, the worst, same topic. The same topic as Eric Swalwell, and the winner is little Jesse Waters, host of a Fox primetime show and co-host of its highest-rated show, which is now on at 5 o'clock, because most Fox viewers are now so old they cannot stay up for primetime, even a little. They're just coming back from dinner at 5 o'clock. They're going to bed at 7:45. Therefore, Fox is officially out of new people to host their propaganda shows, and the lineup is almost embarrassing. Well, it's Sean Hannity, so it is embarrassing, but the rest of the lineup is almost embarrassing. Jesse is profoundly simple. And at Fox, this is a prized commodity because it is the simple people who desperately need to be on TV and will do anything to be on TV, who do not have to be told what to say by their brainwashing bosses. They look for things that they know will please their bosses. And Jesse found something that will rile up his boss and his audience on the 5, those 97-year-old women watching him. I quote about Swalwell, quote, "Don't just whip it out." As an aside, yes, this was on TV at 5 in the afternoon. Quote, "Don't just whip it out." Allegedly, he was just whipping it out in a car in broad daylight in front of the intern. That's not the moment you do it. It has to be done in the moment of maybe some passion. with the co-host Dana Perino realizing that Waters was now about to damage the eternal Fox damnation of Bill Clinton, Rule 1 of Fox dialogue. She interrupted with, "Never with an intern." Waters then parroted, "Never with an intern." But he's giving advice about when to whip it out. So if you're trying to figure out what this was all about, what the whole Jesse Waters, Stephen Miller is a sexual matador thing was all about, what all the other Jesse Waters inappropriate and amazingly unattractive attempts at the big sexy are about, I can't explain. Jesse Waters worked at Fox News for a decade for Bill O'Reilly. Jesse, right you are, Mr. Mayhofer Waters, today's other worst person in the world. In Monday's episode, I told the story of Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut reportedly meeting with a bunch of progressive donors or activists at a French restaurant in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. to discuss what they thought was advancing their agenda and what he thought was an update for them on efforts to remove Chuck Schumer as the minority leader. Oh, God, please. I told that story, and there doesn't seem to be an update on it, and we're still stuck, apparently, with Schumer through the midterms. But the whole story about where this happened, the venue, the Georgetown French restaurant, struck a chord with me and a memory deep in the back of my mind that is 43 years old, and for your purposes, I think will have been worth the wait. To the number one story on the countdown, and the punchline, yes, she hit him, but no, he didn't fall out of the chair. I have given you the punchline to the story, the climax of this entire saga I am about to relate, because I cannot, in good conscience, mention the name of the woman who told me that, and the woman it happened to, the woman who hit him, but no, he didn't fall out of the chair. I will tell you that the guy who did not fall out of the chair, whom she hit, was named Ted Turner. This is from 83 or late 1982, possibly, in the early days of my first days in television with CNN, working for Ted Turner, when nobody knew who CNN was. And in fact, if you went into Washington, there were only 3 places in which CNN was visible. The Holiday Inn in Georgetown, which was next to the CNN bureau, in which we all stayed, those of us who were not living in Washington working for CNN, the CNN offices themselves, and a bar down the street, which was next to a graveyard across the street from the CNN headquarters at the time, on Wisconsin Avenue, I believe it was. And then the third place was the Pentagon, where they used it because this was the first time they could see things live from Europe and other places, because Ted spent money, to his credit, like it was going out of style, and like he knew that the news business was going to be immensely profitable someday, and it didn't matter how much he spent. The rest of us, we were all terrified because he didn't pay us anything, and I was convinced that someday, with those meager checks and with the $70, $80, $100 million a year he would add to his debt for CNN, we would somehow become individually responsible for part of that debt simply by endorsing our paychecks. It wasn't a fear based in fact, just paranoia. And in fact, if we were charged what we were being paid, well, I took a 1/3 pay cut from part-time work in radio to go work for CNN in 1982, so it wasn't all that much to begin with. I literally had to bargain with them for 5 hours to get them to pay me $26,000 a year to be the national sports correspondent based in New York, rather than $25,000. When they were paying me, I should add, $500 a week freelance, which added up to $26,000, and then they offered me $25,000 in a contract, and I said, why would I do that? And they said, well, you're going to contract, and I said, I don't want a contract, I want the $1,000. Well, why don't you want the security? I said, what security? This is CNN. How do I know you're going to be in business next year? Anyway, so odd years later, my prediction about how do I know you're going to be in business next year is finally coming true, perhaps. But I have strayed from this wonderful story of, yes, she hit him, but no, he didn't fall out of the chair. I spent a lot of time in the Washington Bureau in 1982 and 1983. In fact, I think I totaled it up, and it was something like, over those 2 years, 5 or 6 months, usually a week or so at a time, going down to Washington and living in the Holiday Inn and getting to know a really nice and very talented group of people, many of whom went into, the producers that is, went into anchor jobs around the world, around the state, around California, around this country, and had brilliant successes in their futures. I worked with some of the more interesting people and in fact worked with Daniel Shore, who was a legend of CBS News. I worked at CNN with Bernard Shaw, who was a legend both in reality and in his own mind. I met Gordon Barnes, who was a legendary meteorologist in Washington and New York. It was a great place. In any event, also the hotel was pretty good and they cleaned up after me. One of the people I met on my often weekend responsibilities there was an intern who managed to get herself a job, maybe paying $20 a week, running camera on Saturday mornings. And I got to know her largely because she was a beautiful 6-foot-tall, super intelligent blonde woman. And we'll just refer to her as her, because she went on to a career in news, and I don't think she's ever authorized, I've lost touch with her, obviously, but I don't think she's ever authorized me to tell this story, and I don't think she'd like me to because I believe she went into conservative media at some point. So we'll just leave it out of her, the story out of her name. I do think that perhaps it would be justification here for telling the story based on some of the things she said on the air, but that would be small of me. And as you know, I never do anything small or petty about other people in the business. In any event, she and I got to be pretty good platonic friends. That was the premise going in. She didn't want to date anybody she worked with. So every time I would go to Washington, certainly the last year or so that I was down there, every time, we'd go and have lunch and have a nice time. And she was great. She was funny and witty, and she had aspirations for going into the business. And she had already worked on Capitol Hill a couple of times. So although I think we were contemporaries in age, and I would have been 23 or 24 when I met her, she had lived an entire lifetime in addition to the one that I had. She'd worked on Capitol Hill, which meant she could run at about 35 miles an hour in high heels if being chased by aggressive and unhappy men. In any event, that was the era of this story in which sexual harassment was largely a challenge for women. When it got out of hand, usually a woman would tell other men with whom she worked, and we would beat the crap out of the guy, or he'd be quietly fired and there wasn't a big deal about it. This is not the 1960s in which it was encouraged and expected. This had already at least changed to a period of time in which women were entitled to defend themselves. And in fact, this story may have been the first time that someone was reprimanded for sexual harassment and the victim was in some way compensated for it. And again, late 1982 or the beginning of 1983. So my friend was, as I say, startlingly attractive and really talented and was doing this just to get a foot in the door and was now, having given up her political career aspirations, going to go into television. Well, one day she was working on a Saturday morning and up from Atlanta popped Ted Turner on something or another, some sort of, I don't know, pursuit of a rare bottle of something to drink, I don't know, or perhaps to get in a boat and, I don't know, not sink. I shouldn't leave you with the impression that I did not like Ted Turner. I did not like drunk Ted Turner. The Ted Turner who sobered up circa 1984, 85 after he met Jane Fonda and Jane Fonda saved his life. I like that Ted Turner very much. I've seen him a couple of times since then, and I liked him very, very much. The drunk Ted Turner, he and I almost had a fist fight once. In any event, Ted got one look at my friend and immediately went over to her and made an excuse to talk to her separately and said, "Little girl, what are your aspirations in this business that can't be running camera on Saturday morning at my CNN bureau here in Washington, D.C.?" And she said, no, I'd like to go into television full time, probably on the air. How about we have dinner? So she's telling me this story the next time I was in Washington, probably a week or two after it actually happened. And she said, sure. And I said, what are you thinking? What did you do that for? And she said, I worked on Capitol Hill. There's nothing he can do that hasn't been done to me already. I can really run fast in these high heels. And I said, I bet you can. I said, I bet you can. And we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so now I said, well, let me know what happens. And one night I went back to New York, and one night I got a phone call from her at about 10:30. And it was really a surprise because long-distance phone calls, even from Washington to New York, were really expensive in 1982 or 83. And she reported the following, and we discussed it many times thereafter. And as you'll see, I didn't just let her story stand. I checked it out. I was a good reporter on this little story. She agrees to go and meet Ted Turner for dinner, and Ted picks someplace inconspicuous. 1789 restaurant in Georgetown, the finest French restaurant in Washington, possibly on the East Coast. Certainly one of them, certainly top 10 in the country. And the fine dining and violins playing in the background and everything shimmering and shipshape, and the whole idea you could eat off the plate or you could eat off the floor. And she sits there and she sits down, and he's already ordered the wine, and she says he starts to talk. And if you think I can talk, drunk Ted Turner could talk literally for 24 hours without interruption. He was once late to a meeting with the National Football League Players Association while it was out on strike because he talked and did other things with a flight attendant in what was supposedly a dumpster at O'Hare Airport in Chicago for 24 hours. Anyhow, on he goes about his career, and as he always told people, for reasons I never quite understood, the details of his father's suicide and how CNN was financed and how precarious everything was, but how he was convinced that this was the future of news and this was the future of television, and also this would bring about world peace, and on and on and on and on in that wonderful accent that sounded like a bunch of southern bees talking to you. I had my pleasures of 2 full days with Ted Turner, once at a football game, and I heard this voice, and sometimes it comes to me in my nightmares. Again, drunk Ted Turner. Ted Turner, sober, had a much higher and much, much quieter voice. I liked sober Ted Turner a whole lot, and I was very glad that he became that. But we're talking about drunk Ted Turner, who's out to dinner with a $20 a week camera person at his bureau. And by the way, he is married. He has a full-time mistress who already has a show on one of his other networks. And he probably, if you define girlfriends in the broadest possible terms, has 300 to 400 other girlfriends at the time. He is telling this woman of all of his riches, and finally, after the meal has been ordered, and it is a spectacular French meal, she said, it might have been the finest meal I ever ate, and I have been to all the restaurants in D.C., because remember, I used to work on Capitol Hill, and I used to win races every week with congressmen and senators. She says it was beyond belief, and finally, he pauses and says, well, that's my story, little girl. What is it that you want to do in your career? Because it can't be what I found you doing running the camera in my CNN bureau in Washington, D.C. on Saturday morning. I checked into it. I know you're making $20 a week. I didn't know we could legally pay anybody just $20 a week. And she says, well, Mr. Turner, call me Ted. Well, Ted, I want to go into television, and I'd like to be a newscaster. And I figure I should start, so I know what I'm talking about, as a news reporter. And he says, okay. And he takes out, she says, a business card, and she can't see anything at the distance. The table is so big. It's a fine French restaurant in Washington, 1789, Georgetown. And she's watching him write something on it. And finally, he holds it up to her, and now she can read it. Across the table. It says, I, R.E. Ted Turner, give you, and herein he actually remembered her name and put it on the card, a 3-year contract for a total of $150,000. So that's $50,000 a year. And for your frame of reference, I had just gotten a raise to $40,000 a year, and I was the national sports correspondent, like their lead sports guy in the field. $50,000 a year for a woman who is making $20 a week for him. And it says, I, R.E. Ted Turner, give you a 3-year contract for a total of $150,000 as a reporter for the new CNN bureau in Detroit, Miami, and I can't remember where the third new CNN bureau opening in 1983 was supposed to be, but that was the third city. Detroit, Miami, and wherever. Signed R.E. Ted Turner. And he holds it towards her and then pushes it towards her. And as she reaches for it, just to grab it, to read it a little bit more clearly, to see what it's actually saying. He's giving me a job as a reporter based on dinner. I haven't even said anything, she said to me. As he holds it out to her and she reaches for it, he yanks it back towards his own neck. It's now even with his own neck. And he says, up in my room. As I said, Cindy went to dinner with Ted Turner because of her confidence. She said, you don't know what I've done to senators and staffers and a few congressmen over the 2 or 3 years I was on Capitol Hill. I know what to do. I know what to do to make sure this doesn't happen again. And she said, this time I was just, for some reason, so frustrated by the fact that he had never, until that point, 2 hours into this evening, let me say more than about 3 words. I didn't even get to order the meal. She said something just snapped inside me, and I stood up, and I leaned in as if to give him a kiss, and when he leaned forward and stuck his head up towards me, I hit him. I slapped him with an open palm right across his face. She said, and it was a really good slap. It was a full contact slap. The palm of my hand, she said, still hurts. I'm holding the phone with my left hand, and I usually use my right hand for the phone. And talking to you, I've got it in the other hand because the other one, I got some ice on it earlier, and I'm going to have to ice it again before I go to sleep. She said, and then I got up and left and called a cab, and happily my major reaction to the entire evening, she said, was, well, that was a great meal. I forget what it was she had. I think she had some beef dish. So we leave Ted Turner, having just been slapped by a 6-foot-tall blonde with a really big wingspan. I mean, this woman was, as I said, super intelligent, and obviously she made it into television. She was an anchor for many years, at least 25 years, and then I think she went into Republican media back when that was not necessarily an indication of insanity. But in any event, she was gifted athletically as well. So he probably got seriously hurt. Well, this is only the first part of the story, and that's the story I heard that night. The next day, I was awakened by a phone call at about 7 a.m. And I'm like, oh my God, who, where do I have to go? Somebody in sports is dead. And it's Keith, it's her. I said, what, are you okay? Yes. I had to talk to somebody. I know I woke you up, but you already know the backstory, and I didn't want to go through the whole thing again. You're just not going to believe what happened. I said, well, you hit him, right? Oh, no, that was only the start. I said, oh, God, what did he do? Nothing. No, that's not. No, I got a call at about 4:30 summoning me to the Washington Bureau. I said, what, 4:30? And I looked at my watch. It was 7 a.m. I said, it's 7 a.m. What, it used to be 4:30 this morning? This has already happened? Yes. They told me to come in. How quickly could I get in? And I get into the Bureau before 6 o'clock, and there's Bill Headline. That's actually his name. He was the head of the Washington Bureau. Headline was his name. I don't know if it was H-E-A or H-E-D. If it was H-E-A, he changed his name. If it was H-E-D, he had prophetic parents. Bill Headline, the head of the CNN Washington Bureau, and somebody else from HR in Washington, and the head of human resources. And this was not even titled human resources. This was like head of personnel for all of Turner Broadcasting had flown up from Atlanta. There are no overnight flights. I don't think there were then anyway. From Atlanta to Washington, he didn't fly commercial. They put him on a private jet and sent him to Washington in the middle of the night. So he must have gotten the phone call at midnight or 1 a.m. And he is sitting there, and she is sitting there, and the head of the bureau is sitting there, and there are other lawyers there, and she's thinking, oh my God, they're really going to go to this much trouble just to fire me because I didn't sleep with Ted Turner. And she says, the Atlanta guy then says, Miss Such and Such, we are aware that there was an incident last night with Mr. Turner, and on behalf of the Turner Broadcasting Company and all of its legal affiliates and organizations, we would like to apologize in full. Mr. Turner is under a great deal of pressure because of the economic conditions about CNN, which I understand he informed you of, and we would appreciate it and take it as a great courtesy to the rest of us who work here if you did not share that information with anybody. But we understand if that's not going to be your attitude towards this. But we just wanted to apologize to you, and Mr. Turner would be here himself, but he is obviously stricken with remorse. And I'm thinking, oh, he's stricken with a hangover, dude. Anyway, so the story is told to me, continuing with this unbelievable outcome that now unfolds in front of this woman whose hand still hurts from hitting Ted Turner at 1789, the restaurant, in front of everybody on a busy weeknight in Georgetown in the year of our Lord 1982 or 83. And she's realizing that they have not brought her in to fire her. They brought her in to apologize or something, and they go on, and Bill Headline says, this is what we'd like to offer you right now. We can't add you to the reporting staff, but we'd like to offer you a kind of ad hoc training program so that you can become a reporter sooner rather than later with us or somewhere else. But in the interim, we'd like to give you the kind of experience that most reporters find really valuable. We'd like you to work on the assignment desk. And she, of course, knew what the assignment desk was. It was the busy place where you made logistics and sent camera crews here and there and tried to arrange interviews and decided what stories required which components. It was a very good training ground. There was another woman working there already named Catherine Couric. You may have heard of her. I don't know how she got there. I presume it was by no means resembling this one. In any event, now she's beginning to understand. They're offering her not just, according to Bill Headline, a job on the assignment desk. And again, she's making $20 a week and is technically an intern at CNN. And Ted Turner has just propositioned her, and she has just hit him in public with an open-faced slap. She said, I may have hit him hard enough to knock him out of the chair. I never even thought of that. She has hit him, and now they are offering her a job on the assignment desk. And here comes the punchline. We'd like to offer you a contract for 3 years here for $25,000 a year. I don't know if anybody at the assignment desk was making $25,000 a year, but you may remember from earlier in this long story that when I first went to CNN full-time, they offered me $25,000 a year to be on the air like 6 times a week. $25,000 in CNN 1983 money was a boatload. Ted may not have made $25,000 a year. So she goes, okay. And they said, all we need from you is a signed promise that you're not going to take any legal action against Mr. Turner for the unfortunate episode last night. And she said, sure. Because she had worked on Capitol Hill and she knew how things worked in the 1980s. The best way to deal with a sexual harassment attempt was to turn it into something to your benefit. And she had just been offered what, as I said, might have been the first time officially a television network compensated a victim of a manager's sexual aggression. She went on, as I said, to, I believe, a 25-year career as an anchor and then into conservative media. But I was still not totally satisfied by this story, delightful as it was. And so, next time I was in D.C., which I think was a week or two later, I went to 1789, not to eat there because it would have consumed most of my month's salary, but I went there to find out. And even then, even at a place like that, a $10 bill will buy you all sorts of information. And by happy happenstance, the maitre d' on duty at that time said, I was not here that night, but of course we all know about it. But the bartender saw the whole thing. He'd be able to tell you. And so I went and bought him a drink, and I had a drink, and he told me. And he confirmed every one of the details. She hit him as hard as I have seen anybody hit anybody with one slap. She should go into martial arts. This was before there were a lot of women boxers. I knew never to mess with her. And that's when he said it, the final story, the final part of the story. Yes, she hit him. She hit Ted Turner in front of everybody. I didn't hear what happened beforehand, but there was something with a business card, and then she stood up and moved in like she was going to kiss him, and he tilted his head up, and yes, she hit him, but no, he didn't fall out of his chair. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Again, I only have that confirmation from the guy at the bar. And of course, the story as it was told to me by the slapper, whose name I'm leaving out of it. I never brought it up with Ted. I wouldn't know if he would remember it, or would have remembered it then, or how often something like that happened, or maybe it didn't happen. I'll allow for that possibility. I just don't, I wasn't there when it happened. She was. Our musical directors of Countdown are John Philip Chanel on keyboards and handling orchestration, and Brian Ray on guitars, bass, and drums. Presumably slaps the drum every once in a while, and their work is produced by TKO Brothers. Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever, is responsible for our satirical and pithy musical comments. When we do play the sports music, it's the old theme from the Olbermann Show on ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. As an aside, they wanted to call that show, the first name of that show on ESPN2 was KO, and I said people are going to think it's a boxing show. So they actually had things printed. They had swag that was printed, like bags and T-shirts and things that read KO, and the name of the show was Olbermann. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed, and my announcer today is my friend Dennis Leary. This program was produced by Ted, Stevie, Rose, and Kit. Everything else was, as always, my fault. That's Countdown for today, day 442 of America held hostage yet again. But just 1,011 days until the scheduled end of his lame duck and lame-brained term, unless he is removed sooner by Jesus H. Christ, or by Dr. Jesus, or by Dr. Johnny Fever. The next scheduled countdown is Monday. Bulletins as the news merits. Until the next one, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.